Good morning, Chief John Thum. Here to give an update on the officer-involved shooting from last night. This all started with a call to Metro Communications where a male provided, "Send the cops in an ambulance because I'm about to commit a felony," was the information that was provided to dispatch. Through some work and working through the number, determined who this individual may be, and he'll be referred to as the involved male moving forward because of his age of 17, okay, involved male. That was what kind of started the call. Through some work with dispatch, as dispatch continued to speak, you could hear what sounded like the individual was loading a gun on the phone. Wouldn't give the name, but said that they were at their ex's house, and ex ruined his life, and he was done with his life, and he was ready to shoot anyone or be shot by anyone. As you can imagine, this created a heightened sense for dispatch and for the officers with this information coming in. Through some work, they were able to determine that it was in the area of Astoria and Whistler Court, and dispatched officers to that area to deal with this issue. And again, continuing to speak with dispatch, the individual provided that, again, that they were at their ex's house and they're going to shoot somebody in the face and get shot himself, potentially, is what was coming in. We were able to determine through looking at the phone number and looking at the facts that are available who this ex and what this family, what this residence may be. We're able to get a hold of them on phone, confirm they were at home in this area of Astoria and Whistler Court, and that they were all inside, and that they also had just received a message from the involved male making similar comments about what was going to take place. As officers came into the area, they advised that family to shelter in place, and we dispatched officers to that house to protect that house and what eventually would unfold. As officers came into the area, they did make contact with the male who was just, I think, less than about half a block from the house or in the immediate vicinity of that house. The male immediately displayed a handgun, and officers began to dialogue with the individual on scene. Just happened to be a on-duty crisis negotiator. Another officer who was a supervisor was also CIT trained, and they attempted to talk to the individual to get him to drop the gun, and were unsuccessful in producing productive negotiations with that individual. After a short term, a 40 millimeter less lethal impact launcher, which we've kind of covered in the past as one of our primary less lethal tools, was deployed, was ineffective. At that point, the male raised the weapon at the officers, and officers returned fire with one shot, striking the male, knocking him to the ground, immediately went up and rendered aid to the individual, and were able to work on him on scene and then get him to the hospital. Upon also then evaluating the scene, it was determined that this was a facsimile handgun. And this is something that we've seen play out in other parts of the country as well. We can see from the information provided and what was being provided to officers up until that point by the involved party, but then it was a facsimile handgun. And again, that's one of the dangers of some of these. So with that, the scene was secured as per usual protocol. DCI will come out and do the investigation. And again, this will be our 8th officer-involved shooting since last November, so I think it was October, end of October. So we work very well with them. We're confident in their abilities and look forward to the conclusion of that investigation, as obviously you see this as a rapid, tense, rapidly evolving situation with the information provided to our officers, creating a very, very unique circumstance. The involved male, again, because of his age, details will be limited as to what we usually can talk about, but even more so what we can talk about, as there are some other elements that are different with a person of that age. So I can entertain limited questions, but understand I'll be even more limited than what I can normally talk about in those circumstances.
Was anybody injured during the incident?
Just the individual the involved male.
What's his current status?
I cannot comment on his current status because of age and things of that nature. So we'll work through that. Again, just kind of a little bit limited on what we can talk about.
That he was 17, correct?
17-year-old male, yeah.
17-year-old male from Sioux Falls?
Yes.
And will he be charged with any crimes?
So as with juveniles, it's kind of there's quite a few charges that would qualify under this, and we'll let the court system work that out. We'll file our reports, the details and facts that led up to this, and then work with the state's attorney. We talk with the state's attorney's office all the time, and they'll go through it and figure out what the best course of action is for this individual.
In some cases in the past, when, I guess, violent offense is committed by someone under the age of 18, they're automatically, I guess, charged as an adult.
Yeah.
Would this be the case here?
That would be inappropriate for me to comment on, just because that's the state's attorney realm for them to kind of go through. And you're right, Alfonso, that's kind of, there's different varieties of how they work through these cases. There's usually a lot of different circumstances that flow through here too. And so, again, premature for us to speculate on that.
You said the firearm was recovered, but it wasn't a real gun?
It was a facsimile, yeah.
What does that mean?
So, again, I wasn't there to handle it, but there's a variety of, and we've seen some of the facsimile airsoft type, simulated type firearms that people use. And again, we'll let DCI handle the details, because as we've seen in the past, we hit pause, secure the scene, let DCI come in and really dig into it. But it was, yeah, that much we know, and we wanted to be transparent about that up front. Because again, it's a tragic situation anytime anybody gets shot, right? And we want to just be full disclosure on that as the report comes out. That, again, but as you see with the facts that were being presented towards our officers, it was a pretty unique situation with a heightened level of concern for the residents of that area, including the family that was there and others involved.
In this case, was it more of a kind of mental health incident, kind of attempt suicide by cop?
So, again, I'm going to speak in generalities, because I don't want to speak about specifics to this case. You can look throughout the country and see similar suicide by cop type situations, right? And you see how they get constructed and how they get put together. And it is a phenomenon that we've seen even locally, but also on a national scale. Again, it's something that we always need to be aware of, and it speaks, again, the phenomenon, not this incident, but the phenomenon itself speaks to overall mental health and the mental health crisis that sometimes people experience.
It's like swatting yourself.
It's an interesting observation. You know, you said basically like swatting yourself. Well, it's creating an environment that really is steering towards a really risky or dangerous conclusion. And again, we'll let the courts work out, determine what's best for the involved male, because ultimately, again, we're not seeking to get engaged in these types of activities, but again, circumstances sometimes steer things a certain direction, and our officers they respond as they're trained to do and presented with certain situations. So.
You said one of the officers, or at least two of the officers on scene, were kind of trained in like.
Yeah. So again, there's a large quantity of our officers that are crisis intervention trained. I believe, I'm not going to hit the exact number, but it's right around 40%. And then some of our specialty units, whether it's SWAT or crisis negotiators or CNU, we often call them, are on duty and on patrol, because we don't have full-time teams; they're collateral duty teams. So we had a on-duty member who was on CNU and a crisis intervention trained officer. And again, it's nice to have people in training and positions when you need them, and we've seen it time and time again where that's really helped and really made a difference. However, in this situation, it still had what we'd say, not a result we're looking for. We always want a peaceful resolution and a peaceful surrender in those situations.
Can you speak to how many shots were fired?
Yeah, one. And then there's a 40 millimeter was used as well. So
Where was the suspect struck?
not going to get into those details. That's for a DCI type report.
You mentioned that this is the 8th officer-involved shooting since October, and just
Yeah.
yesterday we were talking about how it's
Yeah.
it's been getting increasingly dangerous for
Yeah.
officers. Of course, it's obviously every situation is unique, of course, and you find out details afterwards. But heading before that conclusion, like you've mentioned, you're pretty much talking through about what we have to expect. Could expect anything, and is this kind of one of those exact situations?
Well, you're talking about, and it's a good point you bring this up. Like, there is each incident that we've had is uniquely different in how it's presented, right, and how it's played out. And again, there is and that's why as law enforcement, it's really important that we have a professional police department full of great officers who make critical decisions and understand situations in the moment. And and really play them as they unfold. Because ultimately law enforcement kind of has to play the hand they're dealt sometimes in these circumstances, because we're not the ones determining action, we're responding to action. And so, yeah, I think it's something that each one's been unique and a little bit different. And this one had some unique elements to it, absolutely.
And it's, you always find out what the full picture is probably, after an event
Yep.
like this happens, of course, but it's tough, I'm sure, for those officers and for dispatch going in ahead of time, because, there's some things you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And again, that's why the standard is a reasonableness standard, what a reasonably trained officer in that situation would know with training and experience given and going into that circumstance. So there's a lot of Supreme Court case courses if you really want to dig in, to Graham v. Connor and some other ones out there. So, any other questions regarding this incident? Like I said, just because of the involved male's age, we'll be very limited in what we say, as we have been in the past with some juvenile things. And again, I was on the phone with the state's attorney this morning, just talking through some things, making sure we have full understanding, and we do.
How long was the incident, I guess, take place over?
I think
was it a standoff, or was it pretty?
It was a pretty. I think the time of call, I believe, was 5:11, and I don't have it in front of me, but pretty much within, I believe, like 20 to 25 minutes, this was all developing.
It all happened in one scene, one area?
Yeah, one area basically. So.
And was he
Yeah.
not on the scene when he made the initial call? Was he planning on heading over to
He was already there.
He was already there?
Is what we think at this point,
Mhm.
just because of how quickly that unfolded.
Was he outside the home?
Like I said, when officers arrived and they had kind of taken up positions, they were kind of establishing a perimeter or a contact team, and within a block, they quickly discovered that individual was there. And he doesn't reside in that neighborhood, right? So he resides away from that neighborhood.
Okay, so he doesn't live
Yeah,
in the neighborhood.
yeah.
So he made his way there, and he called himself in.
Yeah, called our own dispatch, and kind of some of those quotes I gave you, which is again very unique for a police call. We're not often forewarned of something like that. Where the involved party is calling our dispatch, and dispatch is getting some auditory feedback from what sounds like weapons being loaded and stuff like that. So it's again a unique situation, and one we wanted to just give as much as we could today, because we want to make sure that we're being as transparent as we can about that. So, thanks. Appreciate it.